Growing up in the small town of Summersfield, Ohio, I was introduced early to the tough realities of life. My father's indifference forced me to become resilient, while my mother's quiet perseverance instilled in me a sense of independence. By the time I was a teenager, I had mastered the art of navigating the gritty streets of East Haven, where success wasn't handed to you. It was fought for, often through sheer grit and cleverness. While most people leaned into traditional paths, I discovered opportunities in the less conventional, and occasionally questionable, side of things. It was a hard upbringing, but one that sharpened the skills and mindset I'd later rely on to face even greater challenges. Over time, I funneled that same determination into legitimate ventures, including real estate, vending machines, and a coin exchange business that operated throughout Ohio. Even though my career flourished, my personal life fell apart. Marrying Samantha felt like a dream in the beginning, but as time went on, her lofty ambitions clashed with my preference for a simpler life. Her repeated betrayals, combined with my unwillingness to back down, eventually created a storm that neither of us could weather. When the dust settled, the court rulings were brutal. I was ordered to pay $1,500 a month in alimony, $800 in child support, and cover the mortgage and health insurance until my daughter, Riley, turned 18, or longer if she decided to pursue college. The total monthly obligation? Over $5,200. Samantha, whose affairs with her colleagues at the law firm were practically an open secret, had manipulated the system to bleed me dry. I'm Michael Hayes. My ex-wife, Samantha, was a legal assistant who climbed the ranks, and we share a daughter, Riley, my world and my biggest joy. Riley adored me, and I did my best to make her happy, taking her on outings whenever I could. She even told the judge she wanted to live with me, but her wishes were brushed aside. The whole trial felt rigged from the start. Samantha had a stable job and didn't need the level of financial support the court awarded her, especially with the mortgage and everything else I was covering. It all reeked of bias. But I wasn't about to sit quietly and take the hit. I started planning my payback. I've always been the kind of guy who fights back when wrong, a skill I honed growing up in Summersfield, where settling scores is practically a rite of passage. Some people call me a businessman, but I simply see opportunities and go after them. My early ventures weren't all above board, but these days, I own rental properties, a vending machine business, and a statewide coin-changing service similar to Coinbank. And that last one? It sparked the perfect plan to give Samantha exactly what she deserved, her payments entirely in coins. Let her lug that to the bank. Back when we were married, Samantha's career took off after Riley started school. She went from working part-time to becoming a legal assistant and rapidly climbed the ladder, thanks to her charm, or so I suspect. I didn't think much of it at the time. I supported her ambitions, unaware of the double life she was living. As her success grew, so did her appetite for an extravagant lifestyle. She pressured me into buying a $700,000 house in Oak Ridge, insisting it was the kind of place she deserved. Begrudgingly, I agreed, though I held on to our Maplewood home as a rental property. That new house never felt like home to me. It was filled with expensive furniture and decor meant to showcase her achievements, not create a warm family space. Looking back, it symbolized the start of our unraveling. While Samantha pursued status and luxury, I preferred a simpler way of life. After the divorce, I vowed to follow the court's orders, exactly. Riley's child support went into a separate account solely for her benefit. She had top-tier health insurance, but Samantha? She got a bare-bones catastrophic plan with a hefty deductible. When it came time to pay the first spousal support installment, I made sure it was unforgettable. I hired an armored truck to deliver the full amount in coins. When Samantha opened the door with one of her lawyer friends by her side, the drivers began unloading bag after bag of loose change onto her pristine marble floors. The noise drew curious neighbors, who gathered to watch. I stood across the street, recording the chaos on my phone as Samantha screamed at me. With a smug grin, I waved and called out, "Enjoy your money, sweetheart," before driving off. The fallout was swift. Just a few days later, I was approached by a stranger. "Are you Michael Hayes? the man asked, looking directly at me. I ignored him, but he repeated the question, louder this time. Before I could respond, he snapped a picture of me holding what I soon realized was a subpoena. When I refused to take it, he tossed it to the ground and walked away, saying, "You've been served." Once he was out of sight, I bent down and picked it up. Growing up in Summerfield, Ohio, I learned early how to navigate life's toughest challenges, and this court battle was just another storm I had to weather. With the next hearing set for the following Wednesday, I had a week to strategize. My days were packed with phone calls, meetings, and detailed planning, but I made sure to carve out time for my daughter, Riley. Over lunch, Riley's frustration with her mother boiled over. "She's awful," Riley said, her voice sharp with anger. "She made it clear she wanted to live with me, but Samantha wouldn't allow it." I reached across the table to reassure her. "I'll fight for you in court, no matter what," I promised. But when Riley's eyes welled up, and she pleaded, "Just don't do anything crazy, Dad," I knew I had to calm her fears. "I won't," I said gently, explaining the trust fund I'd set up for her, with her uncle as the trustee. It ensured every penny went to her, and none to Samantha. Riley's maturity shone through as she nodded firmly. "She doesn't deserve a thing." The day of the hearing arrived, and Riley, my lawyer, and I waited for our case to be called. Samantha strutted in with her attorney, throwing me a smug look. "You better follow the rules this time," she hissed. Without missing a beat, I replied, "We'll see about that." When the judge summoned us, Riley boldly stood up first, declaring her wish to live with me. Her words were full of emotion, but the judge wasn't having it. He chastised her for her tone and dismissed her request, citing an old psychiatrist's report Samantha had dredged up. The report twisted an incident from Riley's past therapy sessions, portraying me as someone unfit to parent her. I was floored. My lawyer immediately objected, pointing out that no charges had ever been filed, but the judge waved it off, unwilling to entertain any challenges. Then Samantha's attorney ramped up the attack, alleging I hadn't paid child support. My lawyer countered calmly, presenting evidence that the payments had gone directly into an account for Riley's benefit, backed by cancelled checks. Riley herself confirmed it, nodding in agreement. Frustrated by the facts not going their way, Samantha's team pivoted, claiming my spousal support payments, delivered in coins, were an undue hardship. The judge sided with them, announcing that future payments should be made by check. But my lawyer wasn't done. "Your Honor," he began, "the River City Police Department, part of the same legal system, requires cash or card for their fines. If they can specify payment methods, why can't my client?" The judge paused, clearly caught off guard. "This is my courtroom," he finally snapped. "And what I say goes." The bias was glaring, but Samantha and her lawyer weren't gloating now, they were scrambling. I could see their confidence faltering, which only fueled my resolve. Standing up, I locked eyes with the judge and let my frustration boil over. "Are you enforcing the law, or just bending over backward for my ex-wife's law firm? Did she sleep with you too?" The judge's face turned crimson as he bellowed. "Mr. Hayes, you're in contempt of court. 6 months in Clearview Correctional Facility unless you apologize and comply with my orders." I didn't flinch. "Apologize? To this kangaroo court? Not a chance." "Bailiff, take him into custody," the judge roared. As the bailiff escorted me out, I turned to Samantha and smirked. "Good luck seeing a dime, sweetheart." Her stunned face was the last thing I saw before the door closed behind me. At the jail, I went through the usual humiliations, strip search, fingerprinting, and being tossed into a cold cell. 2 guards tried to intimidate me, mocking my defiance in court, but I wasn't fazed. At 6 feet 4 inches and 255 pounds, I had spent years in physical labor, and my rough upbringing had long since stripped me of fear. The next day, I kept to myself in the yard, observing quietly from the shadows. During the evening meal, as I leaned against the wall, a voice called out, "Tex!" Turning, I spotted Ranger, an old friend from my reckless teenage days. We embraced, earning curious glances from nearby inmates. "What brings you here?" he asked, a grin tugging at his lips. "Called the judge an a-hole," I replied bluntly. Ranger laughed. "How long are you stuck here?" 6 months, unless I apologize. Not happening. We found a corner to catch up. Ranger knew me too well, especially my knack for getting even. I shared the details about Samantha, her lawyer pals, and the judge who thought he could break me. "They'll regret every second of it," I said, my voice low but firm. Ranger clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You've always got a plan, Texas. Just say the word if you need backup." "Maybe," I replied with a small grin. "For now, just knowing you're here is enough." That night, lying on my bunk, I felt the fire in my chest reignite. My rough childhood had prepared me for moments like this. Growing up with an abusive father and a mother who never stood up for me, I learned early how to fend for myself. The streets became my refuge, where I found others like me. We weren't a gang, just kids trying to survive, but our petty crimes eventually landed me in juvie. Oddly enough, it was juvie that forced me to rethink my life and start building a future. Now, faced with Samantha's schemes and the court's bias, I knew it was time to channel that same determination. This time, the stakes were higher, and the payback would be sweeter. By the time I turned 20, I'd saved enough money to buy a foreclosed property right in my neighborhood, the first of many. I renovated it with my own hands and rented it out, planting the seeds for a real estate portfolio. 2 years later, I found myself at a local club, testing my luck, when I met Samantha. The details of that night are fuzzy now, the club's long gone, replaced by towering apartment buildings, but back then, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Samantha was new to Ridgemont, a quiet little town best known for its annual summer fair. Her small-town sweetness and refreshing perspective hooked me instantly. We were opposites in many ways, but that only seemed to bring us closer. A year later, we tied the knot. The following year, our daughter, Riley, was born. Around that time, I bought a house in Willow Creek, intending to use it as a rental property, but Samantha fell in love with the place. She insisted we make it our family home, and I relented. Over the next 10 years, we poured ourselves into renovating it, raising Riley, and hosting barbecues for the neighbors. For a while, it felt like the classic American dream. Things began to shift when Samantha landed a job at a law firm. She started craving a more extravagant lifestyle: designer clothes, sparkling jewelry, and upscale dinners with her colleagues replaced our simpler get-togethers. She also began sneering at East Haven, where we lived, claiming it wasn't good enough anymore. Her growing arrogance fueled constant arguments, and eventually, she wore me down, pressuring us to move to Crestwood Hills. 3 years ago, we made the move, partly because of the schools, but Riley despised it. The kids at her new school were snobby and cruel, making her life miserable. She begged to go back to East Haven, and truthfully, I wanted to as well, but Samantha refused. She was finally where she wanted to be. Our marriage reached its breaking point one night when Samantha called to say she was attending a dance with her colleagues. Something about her tone didn't sit right with me, so I decided to follow my gut. Using a phone tracker app, I went to see for myself. From the shadows, I watched her on the dance floor, laughing and moving provocatively with a group of men. Around 9:15, I overheard 2 men in the restroom bragging about their escapades with Samantha, including quick hookups in cars and plans for more later that night. My blood boiled, but I kept my cool. Returning to the floor, I saw her kissing one of the men in the middle of the crowd. At 9:30, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Samantha claiming she was too drunk to drive and would stay over at Paige's house, a colleague. She ended the message with a simple, "I'm sorry." She would be sorry. I trailed her as she left the club, arm in arm with a younger lawyer. They didn't notice me as they climbed into his BMW, giggling and groping each other like teenagers. Watching them didn't make me angry, it sharpened my focus. A plan was forming. I followed them to his apartment, noting every detail before heading home. When I walked in, Riley was waiting up for me, anxiety written all over her face. I looked her in the eyes and said firmly, "We're leaving. For good. Pack what you want to take." She hesitated, then asked quietly, "What about Mom?" "There are others taking care of her now," I replied, my voice cold but steady. Understanding dawned on her face, and without another word, she began gathering her things. By sunrise, the truck was packed, and we drove to my vacant house in Willow Creek. The next morning, Samantha called, her voice sharp and demanding. "Michael, where are you? What's going on?" "Home," I answered flatly. "Why?" she pressed, but I could hear the unease creeping into her tone. "I don't know you anymore, Samantha." "And I don't want to," I said without hesitation. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Where's Riley?" "With me," I stated. "She doesn't want to live with you anymore." Samantha tried to argue, but I cut her off. "This isn't about walking away, Samantha. It's about what you've done. Expect divorce papers next week." Her tone turned venomous. "You low-class loser. My firm will crush you." "Maybe," I replied coolly. "But you haven't seen what I'm capable of yet." In the months that followed, Samantha made no effort to reconcile. She openly flaunted her relationships with other lawyers, while Riley told me about her late nights and her cruel attempts to push Riley toward finding a wealthy husband someday. Now, as I lay in this cold jail cell, I imagine Samantha thinks she's won. But she doesn't realize how much harder things are about to get for her. With no help from me, she'll struggle to handle the mortgage, the bills, and the lifestyle she craved. Jail isn't breaking me. It's giving me the time I need to prepare. On Thursday, 2 guards came for me, saying I had to attend a hearing. They shoved me into a room, ignoring my protests from my lawyer. "You're not seeing the judge, you're being sentenced," one sneered as they locked the door. Before I could process what they'd said, 6 inmates were ushered in. I recognized their intentions immediately and braced myself. "You'll regret this," I warned, standing my ground. The first one lunged, and I broke his nose with a swift punch. The others attacked, and I fought back with everything I had. I kicked, swung, and slammed bodies against the walls, but eventually, a larger man caught me in a chokehold. I struggled until everything went dark. I woke up in the infirmary, my body aching and battered. A nurse approached, her expression calm yet firm. "I'm here to help," she said plainly. "Accept it, or don't, it's your choice." Her candor disarmed me, and I nodded weakly. "Thanks," I muttered, my voice hoarse. Even in my pain, my resolve remained intact. Samantha had no idea what was coming. The nurse returned with breakfast and unshackled one hand so I could eat. "Mind if I ask a favor?" I said cautiously, testing the waters. "That depends," she replied, her tone neutral but curious. "My friend Randy Travers, can I see him?" She hesitated before offering a vague, "We'll see." Then she left, giving me no indication of when, or if, it would happen. Later, Ranger showed up to check on me. His face twisted in concern when he saw my battered condition. "Damn," he muttered under his breath. I described the 6 inmates who jumped me and the 2 guards complicit in it. "I need their real names, not just nicknames," I said. Ranger's expression tightened. "What are you planning?" "An eye for an eye," I replied evenly, but with a twist. He studied my face, realizing the depth of my resolve. Whatever I had in mind, it wouldn't end well for the people who crossed me. "I'll get the info you need," he said quietly. "And?" "That's it. I'll handle the rest," I assured him. The next day, Ranger returned with a folded piece of paper. "Here's the list," he said, sliding it into my hand. "What are you going to do with it?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and caution. "The less you know, the safer you are," I replied, tucking the note into my pocket. Sunday brought an unexpected visit, Samantha and Riley. Samantha wasted no time breaking the awkward silence. "How's life with your new friends?" she sneered, her tone dripping with mockery. I scowled at her. "What do you want?" She shrugged dismissively. "Riley wanted to see you. That's the only reason I'm here." Then, smirking, she added, "Ready to apologize yet?" "Not a chance," I snapped. And stop spreading lies about me and Riley. You know they aren't true. Her eyes sparkled with cruel satisfaction. How do you know I'm lying? She's awfully attached to you, she said, her voice laced with venom. My disgust was palpable. You're pathetic. Go back to your boyfriends and leave us alone. Samantha's smirk only widened as she turned to leave, but I caught Riley's face out of the corner of my eye. Beneath her stoic expression, anger and heartbreak swirled. The moment Samantha was out of sight, Riley rushed over to me, bursting into tears. Don't cry, sweetheart, I said softly, trying to reassure her. It looks worse than it is. I hate her for this. Riley sobbed. For lying, for making me stay with her. She's awful. I know, I said, pulling her into a comforting hug. Riley wiped her eyes and straightened up, her determination shining through. Don't call me Riley anymore. I'm Riley now. I want nothing to do with her or her name. Pride swelled in my chest as I looked at her. Riley, you've got my spirit, I said with a small smile. We'll show them. We spent some time talking, the tension of the visit slowly easing. Before she left, I leaned closer. Can you do something for me? Riley didn't hesitate. Anything, Dad. I handed her the list Ranger had given me. She slipped it into her bag with a nod. Give this to Uncle Connor. Tell him to visit me as soon as he can. Connor, my younger brother, had always been the smartest of us. While I shielded him from our father's abuse growing up, Connor threw himself into technology, becoming a master with computers. Together, we were unstoppable in our own ways. After a tight hug, Riley left, deliberately ignoring Samantha on her way out. Samantha called after her, muttering, "Stubborn brat," before storming out herself. On Tuesday, Connor showed up. His eyes widened when he saw the state I was in. This looks better than Friday, I joked, offering a lopsided grin. He smirked faintly, then glanced around to make sure no one could overhear. Using the coded language we'd invented as kids, he said, Riley gave me the list. What do you need? I leaned forward, my voice steady. Addresses of their wives or girlfriends. Connor let out a low whistle. You're not messing around, are you? Just get me the info, I said. Then pass it to Logan and tell him to visit, but not with the list. Logan was an old friend from East Haven, someone I could trust for tasks requiring a little finesse. Connor nodded, though his unease was clear. Got it. Anything else? Just visit me when you can, I replied. Seeing you helps. Connor frowned. Won't you be out soon? Not unless I apologize, I said firmly. And you know that's not happening. He shook his head, smiling faintly. Stubborn as always. Kept you safe from Dad, didn't it? I countered. He laughed softly. Fair point. I'll check in soon. Back in my cell, Ranger warned me. Things are about to get messy, but they won't know why. The 6 inmates and the complicit guards were still glaring at me, their threat unmistakable. But they had no clue how soon their own reckoning would come. Logan showed up later that week, his expression serious. Connor gave me the details. What's the plan? Did he tell you what they did to me? I asked. Logan nodded grimly. Return the favor. Hit their loved ones where it hurts, but no evidence. Use Steely Dan or one of his flexible cousins, I instructed, referring to tools of the trade. Logan understood instantly. All at the same time? I nodded. And make sure they hear the message loud and clear, don't mess with Titan. Logan's eyes lit with determination. I'll get my guys. Consider it done. About a week later, I started noticing changes. 2 guards were suddenly missing, and one of the 6 inmates who had attacked me looked visibly shaken. It didn't take long to connect the dots. The plan had been executed. Word spread quickly among the prisoners, and soon they were calling me Titan. The glares from the 6 confirmed it. One of them eventually confronted me in the yard. Before things could escalate, Ranger's crew closed ranks around me, their presence a clear warning. You're a piece of garbage. The inmate spat, his voice filled with venom. My girlfriend dumped me. Said she didn't want to risk getting hurt. And guess what she mentioned? Don't mess with Titan. I smirked. Smart woman. Now she knows what it feels like to lose something important. You hurt me, I hurt the people you care about. Next time, it'll be your mother's turn. His face paled as he backed away, retreating to his group without another word. Later, 2 guards cornered me in the hallway. Their faces were twisted with anger. We're watching you, one of them growled. You think you're untouchable, but we'll make your life hell. I locked eyes with them, my tone icy. Then I guess your wives better brace themselves. They might start receiving some unexpected attention. One guard snapped and started hitting me in full view of prisoners and cameras. I didn't fight back, letting him vent his rage while the others watched. After what felt like an eternity, another guard intervened, pulling him off me, but the damage was done. Everyone had witnessed it. Back in the infirmary, Emma, the nurse, greeted me with a knowing look. Trouble again? She asked, pulling out supplies to treat my injuries. I didn't lay a hand on him, I said evenly. He just lost it. Well, there'll be an investigation now, she replied as she wrapped my ribs. This might cost him his job. Good, I muttered. One less corrupt guard. Emma's gaze was steady. Guards are supposed to protect you, whether you believe it or not. Maybe, I shot back. But last time, they let it happen. She didn't respond, just finished her work and kept me overnight for observation. The next morning, the suspended guard's partner passed by my room, glaring daggers at me but saying nothing. It was clear he understood the unspoken warning, don't mess with Titan. Weeks passed, and I noticed Riley hadn't visited. When Connor finally came, he brought news that sent a fresh wave of anger through me. Samantha was refusing to bring her. That woman's trying to keep my daughter from me now. I fumed. She's pushing this too far. At the end of the month, Samantha finally showed up, dragging Riley along. Apparently, Riley had refused to leave the car until Samantha relented. By the time they entered the room, Samantha's mood was already sour. Your daughter is impossible, she snapped, her voice dripping with frustration. She barely speaks to me and is just as stubborn as you. You've mentioned that before, I replied calmly. So why not let her live with me? I'd be more than happy to take her. Not a chance, Samantha shot back. She needs a good education to succeed. Willow Creek has good schools and she loved it there, I countered. Crestwood's better, Samantha insisted. She's making connections that will help her future. Our daughter doesn't need anyone else to shape her future, I said firmly. She'll make her own way, without anyone's coattails. Samantha's tone turned sharper. You're too blind to see what's best for her. I sighed, tired of the endless back and forth. Samantha, we've had this argument too many times. You're not going to change my mind, and I'm not changing yours. So why are you here? Because it sure isn't to bring Riley to me. It's Riley, not Riley, she corrected coldly. That's not what she wants to be called, I shot back. Don't you want her to think for herself? You mean to be stubborn like you? Samantha retorted. No, I said, staring her down. To be independent. To stand on her own without needing someone else's money or power. Samantha smirked at the jab, then cut to the chase. I need spousal support. I've got bills to pay. I leaned back in my chair, calm but firm. You'll have to figure that out on your own. I'm not working, so there's no money to give. Her face twisted in disbelief. What? I can't cover everything with my income. Maybe you should have thought about that before dragging me to court, I replied coolly. You made this worse by paying me in coins, she snapped. And now you're getting nothing because I'm in jail, I said matter-of-factly. You have to pay, she shouted, her frustration spilling over. No, I don't, I said evenly. What are they going to do? Jail me again? I'm already here. What about the bills? She whined. Ask one of your lawyer buddies. You're good at finding those, I replied icily. Her face flushed with rage as she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Moments later, Riley entered, her expression a mix of amusement and relief. "You really pissed her off," she said with a grin. "She expects support from jail. Let's see how that works out," I replied. "How are you holding up?" "Still not talking to her," Riley admitted. "Only when I have to." "When are you getting out?" Riley asked, her voice tinged with sadness. "I'm not apologizing to that judge," I said firmly. "Not unless he gives me full custody of you. That's not going to happen, so I'll be here for 6 months. Riley nodded slowly, her disappointment clear. "Next month's my birthday. I'd love to celebrate it with you, but don't compromise your principles for me. We can celebrate when you're out." Her words tugged at my heart, but then she said something that caught me off guard. "If a man has no principles, he has nothing. Like Lincoln said, important principles can and should be unbending." I raised an eyebrow. "Where did you hear that?" "My school counselor, Dr. James," she replied. "Some teachers noticed my grades slipping and suggested I talk to him. He's been great, helping me deal with Mom, even though I still don't talk to her much." It was one of those rare moments when Crestwood's privileges showed their worth. In a district like hers, even school counselors had doctorates in psychology. "Well," I said with a wry smile, "your mom doesn't seem thrilled with you either." "She's been getting on my nerves," Riley said with a shrug. "I just ignore her. I think it makes her angrier, but I don't care. In a couple of months she'll have more to worry about," I said. "The bank won't wait long to foreclose on that mansion. By 3 months it'll be gone." Riley's brow furrowed. "But Dad, won't that hurt your reputation?" "Honey," I said gently, "when you pay for most things in cash, credit doesn't matter. That house was the only thing I ever took a loan out for." Her eyes widened. "Really? Even with all your businesses and leases, you've never taken a loan?" "I use profits from one to invest in the next," I explained simply. Riley smiled warmly. "Daddy, I've always admired you, but now I respect you even more." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, smiling back. "You always know how to make my day better." Spending time with her was a gift. Missing her birthday would hurt, but I knew she'd handle it. She's a strong kid. The following week brought unexpected news. The guard who had assaulted me had been fired. With video evidence clearly showing I didn't fight back, the decision was inevitable. A few days later, his partner quit. Whether he transferred or left voluntarily, I didn't care, he was gone. Other inmates began thanking me for getting rid of the bad apple, and my reputation grew. More people started calling me Titan, and I noticed that trouble seemed to steer clear of me. As for the Sixes, they were still seething. I heard rumors that one of their wives had filed for divorce and 3 of their girlfriends had broken up with them. Even slow learners pick up a lesson eventually. Between the threat of more retaliation and my rising status among the inmates, they decided it was better to leave me alone. 2 weeks later, a guard informed me I had a video hearing with the judge. "Not without my lawyer," I said flatly. "The judge is waiting," the guard insisted. "I don't care. Reschedule it." "My schedule's wide open," I replied. The guard hesitated before walking off. 3 days later, they set a new date, and I insisted on meeting with my lawyer 30 minutes beforehand. When we met, my lawyer seemed puzzled. "I wasn't given any details about this meeting," he said. "That's unusual. Guess we'll figure it out together," I said with a smirk. When the judge appeared on the video screen, his irritation was obvious. The delay had clearly annoyed him, but I didn't care. To me, he was just another egotistical bureaucrat who thought a robe made him untouchable. My lawyer spoke first. "Your Honor, may I ask what this hearing is about? We weren't given any information in advance." The judge waved off the question. "Your client didn't need you. I wanted to see if he was willing to apologize to the court for his previous outbursts." My lawyer glanced at me, and I motioned for him to lean closer. After whispering my response, he straightened up and said, "Your Honor, my client has no intention of apologizing and believes the court owes him an apology." Additionally, he's requesting primary custody of his child. The judge looked stunned. Why would I apologize to him? And no, the custody ruling stands. Then this meeting is unnecessary, my lawyer said, preparing to end the call. If my client changes his mind, we'll let the court know. Good day, sir. The judge held up a hand. One more thing. I braced myself. Here it comes, I thought. Your client isn't complying with the divorce decree, the judge said, his tone sharp. When does he intend to make the spousal support and mortgage payments? My lawyer turned to me, and I whispered my reply. Your Honor, he said, my client has no plans to make payments while incarcerated. The judge's face darkened. But the house will be foreclosed on, he said. It's not my house, I said bluntly, leaning back in my chair. It might be my wife's mansion, but it's definitely not mine. I never even wanted the place. The judge's expression tightened. If you let the house go into foreclosure, it will destroy your credit and wipe out your equity. I shrugged, letting a smirk cross my face. Small price to pay to see my favorite ex-wife out on the street where she belongs. The judge's jaw clenched as I added. Maybe her friends can pool their resources and cover the payments. I'm sure she's got plenty of them willing to help. The jab landed. I knew it would. Implying there was a personal connection between the judge and Samantha was too tempting to resist. You worthless Rivertown scum! He spat, his voice shaking with rage. Who do you think you're talking to? I stayed calm, leaning forward slightly. I think I'm talking to the man who enjoyed my wife's company. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I just don't see why anyone uninvolved would care this much. Rising to my feet as the guard moved toward me, I turned for the door. Behind me, the judge shouted. Counselor, your client just earned himself 2 more months in jail. If he keeps this up, I'll make his life a living hell. The guard's wide eyes told me he couldn't believe what I'd just done. As I was escorted back to my cell, it hit me. Samantha had clearly been discussing the mortgage with her friends, and somehow, that information had reached the judge. It was messy, but their day of reckoning would come. That Sunday, Samantha showed up again, dragging Riley along. I heard you ticked off the judge and got 2 more months added to your sentence, Samantha sneered. When are you going to learn you can't fight the system? Why are you even here? I asked, my tone tired. You don't want to talk to me. All I care about is Riley visiting regularly. You're impossible, she practically screamed. You're just acting out against Crestwood. I don't need this nonsense. It's Riley, I corrected flatly, turning away as she continued her tirade. Eventually, Samantha stormed out, slamming the door so hard it echoed through the room. Moments later, Riley walked in, her face lit with a big smile. Why are you so happy? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Because I'm seeing my dad, she said brightly. That can't be the only reason, I teased, leaning back in my chair. She grinned mischievously. I have a surprise for you, but I can't tell you about it yet. I need to figure out the details first. I studied her playfully. Riley, do you trust me? With my life, she said without hesitation. Then will you sign this without reading it first? She asked, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket and holding it out to me. I narrowed my eyes suspiciously. What are you up to? You'll find out soon enough, she replied, her tone teasing. I thought you trusted me. Chuckling at her boldness, I signed the paper, careful to only reveal the signature line as she held it in place. There, I said. But you owe me an explanation later. She tucked the paper back into her pocket, a triumphant look on her face. Mom says you got 2 more months added to your sentence, she said, shifting the topic. Is that true? Yes, I admitted. And I'm sorry, sweetheart. What did you do? She pressed, her curiosity piqued. I confronted the judge again, I said with a smirk. Riley grinned. Whatever you said, I bet he deserved it. We talked about school and her life at home. She mentioned her school counselor, Dr. James, several times, hinting at how helpful he'd been. I tried steering the conversation back to the mystery paper, but she shook her head. It's a surprise, she insisted with a sly smile. Before she left, I shifted the topic again. I'm sorry I won't be there for your 16th birthday, I said softly. But the next time you visit, I'll have a gift for you. Her eyes lit up. What is it? I grinned. It's a surprise. Guess we're both keeping secrets. As she stood to leave, I added, Can you do me a favor and ask Greg to visit? I need to talk to him about something important. Of course, Daddy, she said warmly, giving me one last hug before heading out. Greg showed up a few days later, his demeanor steady as usual. After we caught up on the status of my business ventures, I shifted the conversation. I want to throw Riley a surprise birthday party, I said. Greg raised an eyebrow. A party? Are you serious? Absolutely, I replied firmly. She deserves it, and it's the perfect way to remind her how much she means to me. Greg nodded slowly, the skepticism giving way to determination. All right. Let's make it happen. Greg nodded thoughtfully. All right, I'll make it happen. I'll talk to our lawyer first, he said. I'll also visit Connor and hand over the package you prepared. He'll know what to do. If he has any questions, he can come to me. Otherwise, I'll send him to Logan. Perfect, I replied, grinning. Logan had always understood how my mind worked. I knew he'd handle things while keeping me guilt-free in here. By the end of the month, my reputation among the inmates had skyrocketed. Word about my clash with the judge had spread like wildfire, probably helped along by a chatty guard. Jail was no different from any other tight-knit community. Rumors flew fast. Soon, nearly everyone was calling me Titan. Toward the end of the month, I was called to the visitation room. I stopped short as soon as I saw Samantha waiting inside. Annoyed, I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Please wait. I need to talk to you. I sighed heavily. I don't have anything to say to you, Samantha. She ignored my dismissal and pressed on. We're going to lose the house. You have to give me money to stop the foreclosure. I stared at her coldly. It's not my house, Samantha. It's yours. I never wanted it. You nagged me into buying it, and now it's a financial black hole. Let the bank take it. It doesn't matter to me. Her voice cracked. Michael, you can't do this. You have to help me. I crossed my arms and met her gaze without blinking. Why don't you ask your friends for help? I'm sure they have deep pockets. Then you can embrace the lifestyle you've chosen fully. Tears welled up in her eyes. Why are you doing this to me? She whispered. I didn't hold back. Why did you lie to the judge and accuse me of mistreating our daughter? Her face went pale, and she froze. For a moment, she looked utterly defeated as the weight of her actions sank in. Tears began streaming down her cheeks. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out, a sense of relief washing over me as the guard escorted me back to my cell. Midway back, the guard's radio crackled to life. Take him back to visitation, came the instruction. Expecting to find Samantha still in tears, I was surprised to see Riley waiting instead. Riley! I said, startled. Your mom didn't mention bringing you. She didn't, Riley replied with a shrug. I wouldn't let her come here without me. I smiled, grateful to see her. I'm sorry I missed your birthday, I said, but I do have a gift for you. Dad, she said softly, her voice steady. I knew you'd miss it, and I don't care. I love you anyway. You don't have to get me anything. My heart swelled with pride. I don't have it with me, I admitted, but I can tell you what it is. The house in Willow Creek, it's yours. I've put it in a trust for you. Once you turn 18, it's all yours. Her eyes widened, lighting up with excitement. When I get out of here, she asked eagerly, can I live there? Of course, I said with a grin. I'll even cover the rent. Riley's smile stretched ear to ear. Daddy, oh my God! She exclaimed. You just made it so much easier for my surprise. I can't tell you yet, but it'll make sense soon. I love you so much. I love you too, honey. I said warmly, still wondering what her surprise could be. As we talked, she brought up Dr. James Anderson, her school counselor, again. I couldn't help but wonder if she had a crush on him. I hoped he was a professional and had no inappropriate intentions. I'd make it a point to meet him as soon as I got out. When the guard escorted me back to my cell, I couldn't stop smiling. Partly because of my verbal showdown with Samantha and partly because of the uplifting talk with Riley. The other inmates watched me curiously. In jail, smiles usually meant someone had been hurt. Not long after, Logan came to visit me. He leaned in, his voice low as he said, "Everything is set. We've got the video evidence." "Video?" I asked, intrigued. He nodded. "Your wife, paralegals from her firm, some of them married, and a certain judge you know well. They're all on camera. It's a mess." Logan smirked. "They got comfortable. Bragged about being untouchable and doing whatever they pleased. People underestimate janitors," he added. "They come and go unnoticed. A year of free rent was enough to convince one of them to install hidden cameras in the offices and conference rooms. It's all on tape." I leaned back, my grin widening. "Perfect," I said. "Let's get to work." I knew we had enough dirt to ruin lives and upend careers. My brother, working anonymously, would release the videos online under the slogan, "Don't mess with Titan." He'd make sure they reached key websites, every major news outlet, and tabloids across the state. The media frenzy would do the rest, leaving politicians and lawyers scrambling to contain the damage. With a smile, I told Logan, "1 week. Let the others know what to do next." "Got it," Logan replied, his expression determined. Walking back to my cell, I couldn't hide the grin spreading across my face. Ranger saw me coming and immediately knew I'd spoken to Logan. "Holy crap," he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. I simply nodded, the grin widening. When the tapes were finally released, I lay on my bunk, listening to the buzz spreading through the prison. Somehow, even in this grim corner of the world, the news had traveled fast. I started hearing inmates muttering the phrase, "Don't mess with Titan." A few days later, one of the Sixes, the gang I had tangled with, came to my cell. He was a massive guy, but he looked uneasy. "You're a bad dude," he said bluntly. "I'm sorry for what I did to you." Staying calm, I replied, "I warned all of you not to cross me. I respond to kindness with kindness and violence with violence. I hope you'll accept my apology too." The man nodded slowly. "Sure, but just because you're big doesn't mean you can't hurt yourself." With that cryptic warning, he walked out, leaving me alone to reflect on the encounter. 3 days later, I was summoned back to face the judge. My lawyer had been contacted and was already waiting in the video room when I arrived. "Any idea what this is about?" he asked, his smirk matching mine. "Not yet," I replied. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." When the judge appeared on screen, his face was red with fury. "You did it!" he shouted, his voice trembling with rage. "Did what?" I asked evenly. "You're Titan, aren't you?" he bellowed. "Some people call me that," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You're going to pay for this," he yelled, slamming his hand on the desk. "How could I have done anything?" I asked. "I've been in jail for 4 months." "You have friends," he accused. "We all have friends, Your Honor," I replied with a touch of sarcasm. "You're not getting away with this," he spat. I leaned forward slightly. "I don't know, Judge. From what I hear, you might be out of a job soon. And isn't your wife filing for divorce?" The judge's face turned even redder. "Call off your dogs," referring to my friends as dogs might not sit well with them, I said. "And remember, corner a dog and it might bite." "Is that a threat?" he asked, glaring. "Not at all. Just a saying," I replied, my tone as even as ever. "I'll make your life a living hell," the judge roared. "When you get out of this filthy prison, you'd better watch your back. One day, someone will make you pay, and I'll be delighted to see it happen." With that, he abruptly ended the call. Turning to my lawyer, I asked, "Did you catch that?" "Every word," he said, holding up his phone. Perfect. I'm sure the Bar Association will love it. Last I checked, judicial intimidation is a crime. A few days later, Samantha visited me again. My mood soured the moment I saw her. Oh, it's you, I said flatly. I thought I made it clear. I have nothing to say to you, she shouted, her voice trembling with anger. Then why are you here? I asked unfazed. You ruined my life, she cried. My picture is all over the internet and the news. How could you do this to me? You did this to yourself, I replied coldly. Do you hate me that much? She asked, her voice cracking. More than you could imagine, I said. And your arrogant lawyer friends, too. When we met, you were a sweet, small-town girl with charm and personality. Now you're just a selfish Crestwood witch. Tears welled up in her eyes. What am I supposed to do? She asked, her voice breaking. I don't have a job, and no one will hire me. Leaning forward, I locked eyes with her. Move back to Rivertown. Stay with your parents, I said bluntly. I can't, she replied. The local paper ran a headline, Local Girl at Center of Crestwood Scandal. My parents are retiring early and moving to Florida to avoid the gossip. Perfect, I said with mock enthusiasm. Florida sounds like the ideal place for you. The farther away from me, the better. They don't want me there either, she said. They barely talk to me anymore. Well, I said sarcastically. Your parents barely talk to you. Your daughter barely talks to you. Maybe the problem is you. Her face fell, but I wasn't done. You should move and start fresh. But don't even think about taking Riley with you. As soon as I'm out, I'm petitioning for primary custody. With your reputation, I doubt the court will hesitate to agree. You can't do that, she said desperately. She's all I have left. Samantha, I don't care, I said coldly. You made your choices. We had a good life, but you threw it away for fun. I paused, smirking. Here's a thought. Maybe one of your lawyer buddies can set you up as a consultant. I hear there's a market for nearly 40-year-old lawyers in certain roles. Her face crumpled as tears streamed down her cheeks. She broke down completely, resting her forehead on the table as she sobbed. I leaned back in my chair, feeling nothing but satisfaction. Sucks to be you, I said without a trace of sympathy. Did you bring Riley? It's Riley, Samantha snapped, her voice trembling with anger. And no, she's busy spending time with that doctor friend of hers. Well, I said, standing up, then I've got nothing left to say to you. Don't bother coming back unless you bring Riley. Turning away, I left her sobbing at the table. For the first time, seeing her so broken didn't bring the satisfaction I expected. Instead, it left me feeling oddly hollow. The next evening, I saw the nightly report on TV. A fire had gutted the top floor of a 5-story office building downtown. Thanks to the sprinkler system, the lower floors were spared, but the damage above was total. I couldn't help but smile. The day after that, Connor filled me in during a visit. The law firm's external server crashed, he said with a knowing grin. Everything they had is gone. Perfect, I replied, grinning back. A couple of weeks later, Riley came to visit. She must have convinced Samantha to bring her, but the moment she walked in, I noticed the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. Riley, I said, my mood lifting instantly. You look so happy. What's going on? I finally finished my surprise for you, she exclaimed, practically bouncing with excitement. You'll never guess what it is. I chuckled, leaning back. Based on our last talk, it's something to do with the Willow Creek house. Don't tell me you and your mom moved there. Ha! Riley laughed. She'd live anywhere but there. I frowned slightly, trying to piece it together. What do you mean? Mom's getting evicted from the Crestwood house, Riley explained with a sly grin. And I'm moving into the Willow Creek house. I blinked, processing her words. How can you do that? The court gave her primary custody until you're of age. Riley's eyes sparkled with pride. I'm legally an adult now. I stared at her, stunned. Wait, what? Her grin widened. I got emancipated. That's what Dr. Anderson and I have been working on for the last 2 months. When you put the house in trust, it gave me the stability I needed to qualify. Now I've got a home in a neighborhood I love. So let me get this straight, I said, still wrapping my head around it. You're officially an adult now? Exactly, she said proudly. When things got tough at school, mostly because of everything happening at home, Dr. Anderson helped me figure it all out. Now, once you're out, you can come home. I've already reconnected with old friends, and they're excited for school to start again. I leaned forward, eyeing her curiously. I've heard a lot about this Dr. Anderson. I'd like to meet them. You're in luck, Riley said with a playful grin. Dr. Anderson brought me here today. My brows knit together. The idea of her counselor driving her around the city didn't sit well with me. I needed to handle this carefully. I didn't want to upset Riley, but I needed to make sure boundaries were clear. When she returned, I was prepared for a confrontation. But instead of a man, a striking woman with raven black hair followed Riley into the room. She smiled warmly. How are you holding up? I blinked in surprise. Lexi? She grinned knowingly. I haven't heard that name in 20 years, I said, still processing the unexpected reunion. Dr. Alexandria Anderson, as she was now known, was someone from my old neighborhood. We weren't close, but I recognized her immediately. Riley looked between us, confused. Daddy, how do you know Dr. Anderson? Lexi spoke first. We grew up in the same neighborhood, but he barely noticed me. Turning to Riley, I explained. She was a few years behind me in school. We didn't hang out. And you were a juvenile delinquent, Lexi added with a teasing smirk. Seems like some things never change. You're still behind bars in your 40s. My face warmed as Riley stifled a giggle. Lexi continued, her tone light. I hear they call you Titan now, don't they? Why do you call him that? Riley asked curiously. That was his nickname as a teenager, Lexi explained. He always got even when someone crossed him. And judging by the news about the law firm, I'd bet Titan had a hand in that. I plead guilty, I said with a sly smile. Before the conversation went any further, Lexi turned serious. I hope you're okay with me spending time with Riley. It's Riley, my daughter corrected firmly. Right, Lexi said with a nod before turning back to me. When I started working with Riley 9 months ago, she was deeply upset about everything happening in her life. I started wondering if she might be related to you and Connor. Hayes isn't a common last name. Then, when she mentioned her dad was in jail, I put it together. She glanced at me meaningfully. I felt terrible about the situation, but I figured you'd turn things around. After all, you had a house in Crestwood. I smiled faintly, trying to read her intentions. Well, Lexi, I said, it seems like you've been a good influence on Riley. Riley beamed. She's the best, Daddy. For the first time in months, I felt like everything was finally falling into place. It was just a house, never a home, I said flatly. Our real home is in Willow Creek, Riley added with a smile. South Side, Lexi chimed in. But a way better area than where we grew up. If we'd stayed, maybe things would have turned out differently, I said, feeling a twinge of regret. Later, I pulled Lexi aside. Thanks for helping Riley with the emancipation. It's made a huge difference. She's like family now, Lexi replied warmly. When I'm out, dinner's on me, I said. I'll hold you to that, she said, smiling. Riley and Lexi visited every Sunday, bringing updates about the Willow Creek house. Riley reassured me that Uncle Connor was covering costs, and my man cave was still intact. Her confidence in taking charge of her life was inspiring, though I couldn't help wondering where life would take her after college. The following Monday, Samantha showed up, clearly upset. Michael, did you know Riley got emancipated? She demanded. She did it herself, with help from her counselor, I said calmly. She's already moved out. What about school? She's going back to Willow Creek High, I replied. She hated Crestwood, Those kids treated her like she didn't belong. You caused more harm than good dragging her there. I just wanted her to have a good education, Samantha said defensively. Kids learn more from their parents' example, I countered. What do you think your choices taught her? Samantha hesitated, her voice softening. I hope she learns what not to do. It wasn't all bad, she added quietly. No, but it ended that way, I said, walking away. On my release day, I appeared before a new judge. You could have apologized and walked free, the judge said. I didn't believe the apology was warranted, I replied. You're a stubborn man, he remarked. Some would say determined, I said with a slight grin. I prefer strong-willed, I said evenly. It served me well in business and life. The judge nodded. The divorce agreement remains. You must address the unpaid months. My lawyer stepped in. Your Honor, my client will pay $20,000 today to cover all obligations and end financial ties. Samantha protested. He owes me more. The judge silenced her. Counselor? My lawyer explained. I'd covered Riley's needs but couldn't pay spousal support due to lack of income. With foreclosure and Riley's emancipation, spousal obligations ended 3 months ago. The remaining debt was $1,782, rounded up to $20,000. The judge nodded. If accurate, I approve. Mr. Hayes, you're free to go. Thank you, Your Honor, my lawyer said. In the hallway, Riley ran to hug me, Lexi smiling nearby. Samantha wasn't done. $20,000? That's it, she spat. Let's stay respectful, I said. I'll let you stay rent-free in one of my apartments for 6 months. Willow Creek? She sneered. It's free. Take it or leave it. She huffed and walked away. Turning to Lexi and Riley, I said, Ready to go? I booked Grove Italiano for dinner. Samantha glared, recognizing the name, but I ignored her. Lexi, could your husband join us? I asked. Lexi hesitated, and Riley quickly said, Daddy, her husband passed away. Lexi nodded, explaining. 5 years ago. I kept the rings. It feels like holding on to him. I'm so sorry, I said softly. It's okay, she replied. I'd love to join you tonight. Dinner was incredible, good food and freedom. As we left, I asked Lexi, When you're ready, can I take you on a real date? Lexi smiled. I'd like that. Riley grinned. Daddy, she's stuck with us now. Back at the Willow Creek house, I was overwhelmed by how beautiful it looked. Tears welled up as Lexi whispered, Welcome home. In time, Riley gained a loving stepmother and twin siblings, Alexander and Felicity. Samantha remarried into wealth but never found happiness. As for me, I found peace, and the family I'd always hoped for.